Hey everybody, it's Jeff from Programmer vs. World. Sorry for the break. It's been difficult in the last year or so to actually get out here and start making some new content, but just started a new job. I work from home a lot. I've got a lot of time to sit and think about what content to continue putting on the channel, and I've got some great ideas. And I thought I would keep the AEM tutorial going. Today was showing you how to create basically just a simple component. We're just going to create a simple button and then allow a little bit of customization, and I'm going to call it a day and let your guys' creative energy surge and go out into the wild and make a whole bunch of components. Anyway, I'm going to start by pulling up a website. I'll try to link at the bottom of this video. I'll link the actual package that I'm using. If you come over here to the package manager, you can see I actually have a custom package just for this tutorial that sets it up so that I don't know, it have something more visually appealing to look at when I'm doing the tutorial. And what I mean by that is, let's go to Programming World, double click the main page. I will change this to CF #, right? So this is basically what we're working with. I went ahead and gave it a header and a footer, and I'm using materialized CSS just because it was something I'm trying to get used to for a different project I was working on anyway. So what we'll do is we'll start with this website, and what we'll do is we'll just add a component to it. Now I'd love to tell you that it's mega simple just to come in here and immediately start editing components, but you'll notice we're in the edit dialog right now. I've got the quick starts missing, so I can't drag anything off of it. It doesn't look like there's any targets on this page that I can drag anything onto. So this looks just like a standard website. Well, what we want in AEM is we want to create a way for authors other than ourselves to actually create content. So in order to do that, we got to make a few really quick adjustments and make some imports. So like if I come to my main page component, maybe I should just show you this right off the bat. I've just stuck everything in one HTML file. I'll show you guys how to separate this stuff out later. As a matter of fact, if you followed some of the Sling tutorials, I've already showed you how to move the header and footer around. I just haven't done it for this project yet. And under the client libs, you'll notice that basically all I do is I have material CSS snapped in, and I put jQuery in even though I'm using CQ's built-in one. So there's not a whole lot going on here. So what we first need to do is come right here into the body. We actually need to include a special library that's already sitting in here already that basically initializes the quick start and all the associated JavaScript libraries that are needed to show it. Like by default, they're not even going to be there. So we'll use Sightly to do this, even though this is relatively new for me. I'm used to using JSP to do that. And basically what we'll do is we'll just include, it's libs, WCM, core, components, a knit JSP. Most people that have done this the JSP way are used to this path showing up at the top all the time. If we save all on that and we come back and we refresh here, we'll notice that, hey, now we got a quick start over here. So basically all that did was it initialized the editor components that were needed so that when authors come to the page, those will show up. Now you might ask, why don't they just automatically include that all the time? They were cognizant that sometimes you would have pages that are just static content and you want to keep the authors off of them. So just for flexibility, the easiest way to do that was just to leave that off of, you know, every component being created. Now you can create inheritance, right? So you can create parent types where you can go ahead and create a page template and then let all your subpages inherit from it, and it'll always show up. There's multiple ways of solving this problem, but you notice not only do we have nothing in the quick start, but there's no targets for us to drag onto the page either. So let's go ahead and create one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that this is a test page out of here, and I'm going to put one in. Now the areas that you drag things onto in CQ are known as parses or parses, and it's a crazy term. It's I guess it's lack of us being creative. We just went with whatever Adobe said the component was. It's a parses component, and we'll tend to talk to one another and go, hey, there's no parses on that page. That's what we're talking about. And we do that by basically using Sightly resource. And let's see how many times I can typo this one. the argument to this method, data slightly resource, will be content. Actually, let me do that. And we need to give it a resource type equal to WCM foundation / components Parses, if I remember right. There we go. We should be able to save that, and if there are no typos in that at all, now when we refresh, we actually get a target area over here. So now when we come here, we actually have a target, a Parses, so to speak, to drag components on, but you'll notice we have absolutely nothing inside the quick start that we can actually drag over here. And the main reason this is occurring is because this is a brand new page and we've done everything completely from scratch, and we have no design. Basically, we have nothing in Etsy design that specifies this group of components should always be here. So we need to add those to it. Now, if you come look at the bottom here, you'll have preview, design, scaffolding, websites, reload. If we click on the design, this now turns to a solid bar and we get an edit button. If we click on it, you have to excuse the fact that the materialized CSS is going to mess with the contents inside of here, but basically these are categories. So under the general category, we have, you know, all these different components that came out of the box. You notice most of these have specialized usages, so you have to look each one of them up. For most of the stuff in general is just basic editing, and most of the stuff in forms is just basic forms. I don't know many people that actually leave those enabled. Almost all the forms end up becoming custom because you want to apply your own styles and have your own editors and this, that, and the other. So let's just go into general for right now and I'll show you how it works. And we'll just put a, this is a text sightly component. Let's try that one. So now if since we said that we're going to allow that, it now shows up here along with its category header, and we should just be able to drag it right over in the screen, go into edit text and say this is some text, and say okay, and there it is. If we want to delete it, we can just right click it when that's little areas around it and say delete. So let me do something real fast. Let's put our title back. We'll go into design mode, go to edit, somewhere here's title slightly, right? We'll do that one. Probably should have just done that one in the first place. We'll drag it over and we'll say our first component, right? And this, oh, it's kind of cool. It has a pull down and lets us pick which H style we want. And when we change it, we get this. So this is all good, but you're gonna find real quick that outside of doing very simple component-based stuff, it's always going to be a little bit lacking for you because you're going to be sent styles from your design team, and you're probably going to get comps that are photoshopped, and you're trying to duplicate those and put those in. That's typically how the workflow works. Usually too, the home page like I'm on is much more elaborate. It has more than one Parses. It has areas on the left, areas on the right, different editors, different authors. So you're going to want to create your own. So let's create our own component. Right, and to do that, I'm going to pull up DE Lite. I'm going to refresh here just to make sure we got nothing else going on. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and reuse our components directory right here in the PVW tutorial. And I'll do that just so that I could package all this up and also create a download link for it if you would want it. So of course, as you can imagine, to create a new component, just like we did the page when we did an earlier tutorial, we'll just right click it and say create component, and we sort of have a dialog all ready to go for us. And we're going to call this materialize button. I never spell this right. Just a test component. You don't really need to put a description. It's not a mandatory field. And we'll ignore super type for now. When we get to groups are the categories basically that you were seeing before in the quick start. So let's make our own, and we'll just be consistent about making sure we put stuff in there. I'm not going to fill out anything else. I'm just going to click the next button and go all the way through and say OK. And now we have a materialized button component. I hit save all. You notice by default it started it in JSP. Let me close all these. I don't want that, so I'm going to right click this. I'm going to say rename. Say HTML. Save all. Now when I double click, take all this stuff out. And I basically just want to put a materialized button in. We'll call it button. There's some class information that goes with this. Let me use my cheat sheet over here. I'm actually on the Materialize CSS website, so we'll just say, I'm going to use the waves effect just for fun. Waves light button. Right? And that's all there was to that. So we now have a button. It's in the apps directory. It should get picked up because everything that's a component will be in here. But you'll notice when we come over here now and we come back to our website and I go into design view, I'm probably not going to be able to find this. Interestingly enough, that title component that I did had a Parses inside of it. So if I scroll down here, not only will I not see my category, Programmer versus World should have been right around here, but I won't see that component either. And the reason being is a component won't show on this page or in the quick start. Let me do something real fast, guys. I really don't like how that thing has its own, creating its own Parses there. It's just going to confuse anyone that's trying to watch it. Let's just go back and put a simple title in there. That microphone is so sensitive you could hear my air conditioner go off. That's fantastic. Component. All right, so we'll just do that. Now if I go into design view, it does it anyway. Whatever. Anyway, so you'll notice when we go into, ours is named content. You just have to remember that. When we go into content and actually look, Programmer versus World is not there. It's actually missing. The component itself is missing. There's nothing we can do to actually drag that on there. And the reason being is in order to drag a component from the quick start or even be able to have a component on the quick start, it has to have a design dialog or a component dialog that allows the author to configure it, right? It's pretty much worthless for you to drag a component over here and not have a dialog like this that allows them to change some of the information inside of it. Boy, that's an ugly one there, wasn't it? So we need to create the same thing, and when we do, AEM will automatically detect it and it'll all of a sudden become available. So luckily for us, they've created sort of a wizard for putting these down that goes to a certain degree, gets us as far as we need to be. And let me just show you. I'll show you what I mean. It's kind of hard to explain. So we'll say we want to create a dialog. Leaving it the name dialog is fine, but you really should give it a title. So we'll call this Materialize Button Dialog. Now you'll notice it created an items subdirectory which has items inside of it. Just bear with that for now. And then it created a tab on the inside of it, but it at least has a dialog. So if we save all and come back here and refresh this and go back into design mode, keep your fingers crossed because sometimes this doesn't do it right away. We should notice that Programmer versus World now has a category. If we pull that down, our Materialize button is in there. That's what our description, by the way, our name field did, was gave us a common name. We can now add that in there, all right? And if we look down here, there's these category flippers. We grab our button, drag it over there, and there it is. Doesn't do a whole lot, and if we double click it, we notice we get this generic dialog that just has one tab in it called tab 1. I'm gonna say okay. This is because this dialog is basically constructing the different hierarchies that you would need to create a dialog in EXTJS. I think it's 4.3. Is it 4.3 that's 6.1? I don't know. We'd have to look at what version it's actually using. But regardless, basically what it does is it creates, you'll notice these X types. These X types line up exactly with what an EXTJS equivalent is. So in this case, dialog means a dialog window. Our first collection is a tab panel. Inside that we have what's called a widget collection, which notice it has no X type. This is indigenous to CQ and it tells it how to do something. It's telling it inside here, for every tab, basically this will be a tab panel. For every panel that we drop in here, I want you to create a tab for it. So if we click on tab 1 and we give it a name, we'll just call this General Settings. Whoops, sorry. Right? And we can go back at any time after we save too and take a look at what the instant effect is. Now the tab's named General Settings. So this is where we'll put very common stuff, right? So in order to simulate the same functionality, we basically need to create a new node, right? We'll call this, we won't call it, we're pretty much limited here. This has to be a widget collection, and it has to be called items with a lowercase I, right? Because these others are too. Just remember, if you're saying items, it has to be a lowercase I, because this is sort of using reflection, like not really reflection because it's JavaScript, but it's depending on a specific property called items to be there, and that is the case that it has to be in. And inside of here, we create a new node, and ironically, we're going to call this a widget. I know it's not too intuitive, but we'll call this button text. And save all. So now basically we've created a new widget inside here, and we need to tell using the ext.js4 x types. I think if I go to CQ x types and I do a search, you can find a lot of the documentation on these widgets actually exists inside docs.adobe.com. Anyone who's dealt with ext.js before knows how this documentation over here, navigating to the left and the right, is sort of a pain. Like, you know, most of the stuff we want would be in CQ form, but like right off the bat, I don't even see text field in here. If I search for text field, I find it in CQ ext form. Yet if I come back in here and go CQ ext and I go into form, there it is. All right, so we click on text field, we can see like all of the properties. Basically it's inheritance tree. We can see what X type, what the actual text needs to be that we're going to use. This is probably the most valuable piece I want you to understand about this documentation. That and the fact that all these properties exist. We only care about a few of them. For instance, I know we're going to need the field description and the field label. That seems like it's important. So let's go ahead and put those properties in. We now have that component sitting there. We can just come in and say X type. Oh, I already have it filled out. Text field, and say add. And then we knew there was a field description. We'll put what you want the button to say, and we'll just leave that appearing off. Save that, and then we have field label, and we'll just say button text. And then we have one last thing that we need to do, and we'll give it a name field. Now I'm going to do something really weird here in the value. I'm going to put / in front of that and say button text. And the reason I'm doing that is because name is where it's actually going to store the information that you put inside the text box when you hit OK. And the / tells it, I don't want you to go anywhere crazy in the node hierarchy. I just want you to write it right here in this node where it exists. Now if I come back in here and I refresh this, and hopefully this tutorial doesn't crash, we now have our field description, we have our field label, we have a box right here, we can put something in there like hello world, hit OK. And I want to show you something really unique about this. So if I come back over here, I'm going to take that CF out, and I'm just going to go to this page, and I'm going to look at what it's rendered in JSON format. We can see that here's our Parses, right? Here's the title component that we put in here. Here's its text that it's rendering. Here's our button that we put in here, and I can't believe that microphone could pick her up from another room. That's funny. Here's the materialize button, and here's the actual text, right, that was actually put in. And notice it was saved inside a property called button text underneath the root node of materialize button, because that's where we told it to put it. Now the question is, since it's there, can we use it and actually put it on top of the button? And the answer is absolutely. What we do here is, instead of saying button now, we can say, I want you to, in the properties collection, I want you to find button text and put that in there instead. Now when we refresh it, we get hello world inside the button. If we want to change this into something else, we can just hit that and it's automatically reflected. So as you can imagine, now we can start this iterative process where we just keep adding things to the button, like where does the link go, what styles are on or off, and all of this would just get added incrementally by adding new dialogues or adding new dialog components to each of the tabs, and then doing something with the values that we got back. And that's essentially how components are developed in CQ. They can be as small as a button, or they can be as large as an entire page or an entire form. It doesn't matter. They all operate the same way. So you remember our page could actually be pulling properties from the page level down, right? So our title could be dynamic, and we could allow people to edit that at the page level. As a matter of fact, in our quick start, there's the second tab up here, which is the page level properties, right? So if the page had any and we had defined any, they could also be checked from here. But this is the general flow that you want. You want to be able to create these basic templates and allow authors to create new pages and then be able to drag your components onto it. And this is at its core level, the simplicity behind what AEM put on top of Sling. It was the ability to have access to not only all of the digital asset manager resources like images and everything else to drag over on a page, but to be able to create custom components and drag those over or use the out of the box one. Anyway, I'm Jeff, Programmer versus World. This was basically a really simple example of how to create a very simple component and drag it on the page and give it some properties. And do you guys have anything else that you'd like to learn, or any requests or specific things that you would like to know how to do? Drop a comment or something. I do read them. I don't respond to a lot of them, even though most of them have been incredibly positive, and I really appreciate that, guys, because I really have to organize time to set aside to put one of these together, because I'm usually pretty busy working for the consulting company that I work for. So yeah, I appreciate you guys' comments, man. Leave more. I'm excited to do these. I really wish I could. I need to carve out regular time and keep doing them. But if you have any ideas of anything more that you'd like to see, let me know. I'm Jeff. This is Programmer versus World, and you guys have a good one. It's a Monday, and I need to go get some more coffee anyway. So I'll see you guys later.